and what that meant. Deacon Paul also went over the entire last few weeks that we've been together and reminded us that we should lead with mercy when it comes to having these discussions about morals and so forth. We need to contrast the worldview, make sure we love, make judgments versus judging people's souls. And that relativism is not value neutral. As we watched Dr. Shree last week in sessions 5 and 6, he taught us that the mask covers the real problem, and that we are to take on the heart of Christ when talking to others about what our differences are. As the Gospel of John says, for Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And we need to act in that way. Tonight we'll cover what is truth and answering common questions that will come up about moral relativism. The intent of this chapter is to help us make use in the real world of what we've learned, and with this new knowledge and understanding of the classical view of morality, we'll have the importance of virtue and the knowing that real freedom, what it looks like, and we'll have the courage, hopefully, to go out into the world and address these issues of moral relativism in a way that's acceptable to those whom we are speaking with. Our tools are to be mercy and love. My father would always tell me, son, if you can't say something nice, don't say it at all. Sorry, Dad. I fail almost every day at that one, but I do understand what you meant. He was correct, though. And the only reason we should ever say anything is out of love. We need to keep that in mind when we're having these conversations. The final key will give us confidence that classical morality leads to happiness, that moral relativism cannot. That we don't have to have mastered the art of living before we go and share with others and help bring others to the right way of living life in God's way, the way that Jesus Christ came to teach us. And we'll learn that perfection is possible. Maybe not in the way some of us think, but perfection is possible. A happy life is very possible. And we'll do this by radically witnessing that we care for others, and how we talk and how we discuss with people, that we really care. We're going to need to listen to them, draw out what the real the underlying issues may be, or the misinformed that they are, and such like that. So the next 22 minutes will address some of these common questions and how we should address them. So you'll see some real life bantering. I personally believe, and I'm glad, that the questions may have been a little bit staged, kind of like a CNN interview or something, you know. Hey, you asked this question so I can give this response. But it's very well done, and of course I'm a little facetious, but not 100% about that. But it leads to us getting the answers that Dr. Shree wants us to hear. And so before we turn on the video, I do want to ask, is there anything that any of you would like to share that's happened to you or that you've thought of that's come across in the last week relative to what we have learned in these sessions? Has anybody had a discussion with anybody, seen anything that they'd like to share? For those of y'all watching at home, they're not all asleep yet. So let's do. Let's go ahead and play our video. Let's see if I can do that for you.
I greet you all in the name of Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth,
different conceptions of what marriage is like. Now, Clinton had a very intense personality.
If most of us don't know about some
So now that we've walked through the classical worldview and we've considered 7 keys for engaging moral relativism, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear any questions that you all may have.
I have a couple friends who do live lives that are kind of in a relativistic mindset, and like I just don't know exactly how to break through to the people who actually think that they're happy living like that more secular relativistic point of view.
Excellent question. I think there's 2 things we want to do when we have our friends that they're thinking, oh, I'm in the relativistic world, everything's fine. 2 things we got to do is we have to have the confidence to know they're not really happy, and then secondly, we're going to have to model in our own lives, you know, a different way of life they've never seen before that is inspiring to them. Now, what do I mean by this? So first of all, even though, as I said this, they might give an outward shell, you know, hey, I'm living this party lifestyle or whatever it is, and I think I'm all really happy, and you know, but I can remember when I was a freshman at college, I remember going out to lunch with someone, and this friend, he was older, he was probably in graduate school, and he was a devout Christian, and asked me a simple question. He said, so Ted, are you happy? And no one ever just kind of point blank asked me that. He didn't ask, how's it going? And we got through like catching up on life. And then you know, afterwards he just said, so tell me, are you happy? And I felt awkward. I didn't know how to answer. Yeah, I'm happy. I got a girlfriend, and grades were good, and you know, I'm happy, yeah. You know, but that question haunted me. And that day I just kept thinking about, am I happy? And for weeks I just kept wondering, am I happy? And I realized that I was longing for something more. I was happy on a very superficial level. But I realized that underneath that outer shell, there was a lot of insecurity in my dating relationship with this girl. There was a lot of just fears about what my career was going to be, and uncertainty about what I was going to choose to do, what was going to happen next year at college. There was a lot of turmoil on the inside. I never really pondered. I just kind of was living and experiencing things, ups and downs all the time. But when he asked that question, I realized, no, I'm not that happy. Which then led to further conversations about that. And we have to realize, again, we know the truth, that God made us. He made us to live a certain way, and when we live that way, we will be happy. And so as much as they may be just going, hey, we've got the life, I can't tell you how many college students I've worked with over the years that were claiming to have the life. And then they come by my office, maybe, it might be 2 years later after they had a class with me. Hey, Dr. Can we talk? And they're like, I just got my girlfriend pregnant, I don't know what to do. Or they come in and my parents just got a divorce, I don't know what to do. Or my dad wants me to do this career, I don't really want to. Or this thing's going on with my boyfriend and I'm afraid. And you know, there's just stuff that comes up in life. And they have nowhere to turn because no one's taught them the art of living. And that's where we can come in. So sometimes it's not as if you're going to be able to convince them right there, you're not happy. You know, walk around with a sticker with a non-smiley face. You know, that's not going to happen. But if they see your authentic interest in your life, their care for you, your care for them, and then they see the way you're living a joyful, different kind of life than they are, at some point, they may open the door for a further conversation. That's what you have to hope and pray for. Great question. All right, what else?
So talking about just this classical worldview just really resonates with me. Everything it makes sense to me. Something though, I have conversations with like friends, family. A lot of times they just want to live a life, like a joyful life, even like a life fully alive. And they feel like they're restricted by this kind of worldview. How do you engage people and like explain to them that this is the way to be fully alive when they're like, no, over here doing my own thing, doing what I want. This is how I'm fully alive.
My question is, like, what would they disagree with if you were to go back to that big, moral chart we had over and over again? Are they going to disagree, or we shouldn't be virtuous, or we shouldn't love people, or we shouldn't have relationships? What part of that?
Yeah, I don't think you would disagree with that. I think it's with changing their behaviors.
Okay.
So seeing that, like, okay, I see that, like, there's truth.
I just like getting drunk all the time, or I like sleeping around all the time, or I like.
But I'm not a bad person. I just like doing them, and it's fun.
Yep.
And
Good.
that's kind of the mindset of a lot of my friends is that.
It is mindset of a lot of people, yeah. And in many ways, these people are nice people. They can be very warm and kind and friendly. But I would go back to the question that was asked a little bit earlier, is deep down, are they really happy? You know, in that lifestyle, you know, so let's say they're just partying all the time, they're getting drunk all the time, you know, are they really happy? Because we know, you just have to, again, know the confidence that real friendships can't be formed in that kind of a culture. I mean, you're not truly yourself at those moments. It isn't a lasting friendship. You wake up the next morning, you're wondering, what did I say? What did I do? Is that really? And I know a lot of people just live that way, and they just, because they're caught up, and this is what they watch on TV, and this is what they see, this is what the real life is all about. But if you actually press underneath this, and you actually take them out of that for a bit, and you just love them, and you talk to them, and you take a real interest in their life, they're not used to someone who has a real sincere interest in their life, that really is looking out for their good, that really is totally there for them. Because most of those relationships are more just utilitarian. In other words, we just happen to hang out because we have fun together. I'm not really committed to you. I'm just committed to, we like to party together, like the same pubs together, like the same music or whatever. You know, so it's just about, you know, we just share this fun time. But there's no real, like, if I'm really in trouble, are you really going to be there for me? Can I really confide in you about what's going on inside of me? You know, there's not a lot of that going on in a lot of these relationships. So we take the, you know, the promiscuous lifestyle that's out there with many people. You know, we know that sexuality is meant to be this expression of total self-giving. You know, this act in which I give myself to you completely, totally, holding nothing back, and to the end of our lives, till death do us part. So it's total and free and fruitful. This is what real love is all about in the sexual act, and it corresponds to what we really want in life. Deep down, we want to be known for who we are and to be loved. But in the end, if it's just like, I'm with this boyfriend, but there's no real commitment there, I'm just hooking up with people, it's basically, you know, it's not about I'm committed to you, it's more I'm committed to what I get out of you. Now, a lot of people, they're not even thinking about that, but that's where authentic friendship over time, asking questions, and then being able to share some of these ideas with them, gets them to think. And I've seen this with a lot of college students, a lot of young adults. They're living that life, but then they've never been presented with another way of looking at it. And then you start raising questions to them and shedding light on their experience, and like that. Maybe that's why you're not happy. Maybe that's why you guys are always fighting. Maybe, and then it illuminates, and then they start incrementally taking steps. Yes, question in the back.
In number 5, you said relativism is not value neutral. Is that intrinsic of the philosophy, or is that something that the relativists have kind of assumed and picked for themselves?
Oh, I don't think most people who are relativists have even thought about their way of looking at the world, and it's just assumed, right? It's just the air you breathe, right? If you walk in and say, I think there's a right and wrong for everybody at the average college or high school, everyone's gonna look at you like, what? You must be some Martian, that's crazy. Like, most people are out there kind of like thinking, oh yeah, everybody decides for themselves, at least on the personal matters. Maybe they would agree on, you know, don't have the boats collide. Do you see C.S. Lewis's analogy? Or we shouldn't kill or steal. You know, but when it comes to my own private life, you know, what's going on inside me, you know, that's just my life. I'm not hurting anybody. So there we can be totally relativistic. I think that's where most of our culture is at. So when it comes to you know, showing that their relativistic perspective is not neutral, I don't think they've thought that out, and you're kind of pointing that out to them. You're kind of saying, hey, it sounds like, you know, because you'll be talking about whatever the issue might be. Maybe it is premarital sex, maybe it's some gender issue, maybe it's, you know, who knows what the issue is. Whatever the particular issue is, always try to be thinking not just about that issue, but what's behind it. What's behind it is relativism, and try to start talking about that. You know, it's like asking the questions, does that make sense? You know, so I think that's why I was saying relativism is not value neutral is very helpful for piercing through, because they've never thought about this. Do you realize you have a certain way of looking at the world, and you know, and that's fine, but but you're trying to say that I have to look at the world the same way you are, and I'm just not convinced of this point of view. You know, this philosophy of life, this way of looking at reality doesn't make sense to me. Now all of a sudden they're like, What? Well, why doesn't it make sense? Well, does it really make sense that everyone makes up their own? Now you're actually having a very substantive conversation about relativism itself, and that's a great place to go. As opposed to always just being, you know, at this level of, I think this is wrong. Well, who are you to say what's wrong? And then you never really advance the ball. But if you can kind of get them to start thinking about, do you really want to say there's no truth at all? Is that what you really want? And now you're getting them to think more critically about their own philosophy. Yes?
So, building off of her question, I have some friends in a similar situation. I've kind of, I always thought they're kind of content with a mediocre kind of life. They're like, okay, things are good how they are now, and I have to put in more effort to change my behavior to kind of put all this effort and energy into becoming better. And so I have some of those friends, and then non-Catholic friends, and then there's the other ones who become believing that there is no perfect ideal. Like what we're saying that Catholic faith is like this perfect fairy tale that doesn't exist, that perfect doesn't exist. So they're convinced that perfection doesn't exist.
So I just give up on the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, so there's no use going to be better because you're just going to keep going.
Got it. So I got two. I want to make sure I understand you correctly. It sounds like one thing is friends that maybe they hear about this stuff, but oh wow, it'll just be too hard. It's going to be too much effort. I can't change. You know, that's one question. And the second question is then, you know, people are just hurt by the world, and so they kind of give up on any kind of ideal for life. Okay, let's take the first one. The first point, that's where many great saints have been. Many great saints. I think of St. Augustine. St. Augustine becomes convinced of the Catholic way and sees, yeah, this makes sense. He wants to become a Catholic, but he's afraid. And what is he afraid of? Giving up his unchaste lifestyle. Right? He has this famous quote. He says, "Lord, give me chastity, but not yet." Because he was so attached to his sexual sin, and he just couldn't give it up, and he was just afraid. And so he became intellectually convinced. The Catholic Church makes sense, and you know, I should give my life to Christ. You know, he just wanted to do it, but there was another part of him that didn't want to because he just had this bad habit. You know, and that's why I've been emphasizing so much of what we have to do is not just up here, especially engaging people here in the heart as well. But for Augustine, what was the turning point was he has this kind of conversation with. He's praying, and he uses an analogy. He says it's as if Lady Continence, you know, like standing for the way of chastity, was speaking to him and saying, okay, it's as if he's hearing two voices: Lady Chastity, Lady Continence speaking to him, and then his sensual pleasure, desires for sensual pleasure speaking to him, and the sensual side of him saying, why bother trying? You know, you have all these bad habits. You know, you're never going to be able to give these up. You know, you're going to fall over and over again. You know, you just don't even try. It's kind of what they were saying to him. And then she says to him, I know you think you can't do it, but how do you think all these other people have done it? Have they done it on their own? They couldn't do it either. They felt just like you, Augustine. And that's why they leaned on me, the virtue. They leaned on the grace, God's help. God came and helped them to do what you couldn't do on your own. And I think that's a great story because Augustine felt that paralysis. I just can't change. I can't do it. And yet, Lady Virtue, Lady Continence, Lady Chastity speaks to him and says, yeah, all those other people felt just like you. And they did it, not because of their own power, because they relied on grace. And that was a key turning point for him to kind of beg God for his help, to help him to follow the way of light and not darkness. Another great quote I wanted to mention, so I'm glad you brought up, is from a medieval saint, St. Bernard of Clairvaux. Said, why is it that so many people don't turn to God? He says it's because they imagine this kind and gentle God to be harsh and severe. They just think like that this God's could be so upset with them. And then he goes on to say, and they think that he can't help them. You know, and he goes on and on. I'm just going to paraphrase it, but the idea is, he says, so you think, lifetime's habits can't be changed? Well, that's what Jesus is in the business of. That's what he does. He releases the shackles of the prisoners. You think that your particular sin, can never be overcome. He nailed that sin to the cross in his own body. This is what he did, and he's in the business. He's changed so many of these souls, and he could do the same thing in you. And we've got to give people that hope. That's why I was talking about leading with mercy in our conversation. So when it comes to the latter point about, I see these dreams, a perfect life, and I could be Cinderella or whatever, or the Prince Charming, and then I realize in my real relationships with people, it just doesn't work out that way. there's actually a narrative for that. There's a reason why life isn't a great Pixar movie or a Disney princess movie. The reason it is because we're in a fallen world. Now, granted, even the Disney movies admit the fallenness that's there, so I think that there is a narrative even within some of these, the good ones at least. But we live in a fallen world, and there is going to be suffering. But the fact of the matter, the fact that you experience this hurt and you don't like it, that's a good thing, because God didn't make you to be hurt like this or to be used like this or to have this pain inflicted upon that. You weren't made for that. You were made to be happy. And I think the Catholic world can give a narrative to that and explain, it helps shed light on your suffering. And then guess what? God grieves with you over that suffering, and He wants to help you work through that suffering, and He wants to help you to experience greater happiness. You may never get to paradise here on earth. And it's not going to be the Garden of Eden, because it's a fallen world. We're always going to have suffering. But you're going to be able to endure and face and work through those sufferings better with Jesus than you ever would without Him. Whereas the relativistic world would lead to people just saying, well, there's just suffering in this world, and there's no meaning, and you live what Sartre said, life is just nausea. Just one frustration after another after another. And I'm here to tell you, no. Jesus would be here to tell you there's a better way. He can help us through that. Yes, Morgan, in the back there, has a great question. Good to see you again here.
My question is about having a lot of friends that are relativistic, which they would admit, but also strongly humanitarian, I guess. And so sometimes we get into discussions about, like, when it comes to the political climate, about, like, the lawsuits happening by, like, the Little Sisters of the Poor or whatever, different universities. And they can admit that, like, that's too bad that that's happening to these sisters, but, like, really, what's the need for them? Like, would it be the worst thing ever if these different organizations weren't able to continue, because kind of we can build the world and make it a better, more just place ourselves, because humanity will always, like, take care of it, we'll still continue to serve the poor, do these different things. We don't need, like, the church, I guess, like, for this, or Christians. And how do you respond to this, like, humanitarian relativism?
Yeah, there's two things I would say there. One is, it was going to be about what the church actually has done for the world, and then a second one is about your friends. So let me ask that question about your friends. Are they doing actual work on the streets and helping people? These guys actually do. Okay, so they are getting their hands dirty. Okay, good for them. That's very good. I asked that question because there's a lot of people that talk about, we just need to do more to serve the poor, and we need to, give more money out, and we get the church out of these things. And they talk about, like, social justice, but in the end, if you actually find it, they're not really doing anything personally. Pope Francis says that what we need to do is really encounter the poor. It's not enough to just throw coins at them. Did you encounter the poor? Oh no, Father, I gave him some coins. Did you look him in the eye? Did you talk to him? Did you touch him? If you haven't, then you haven't really encountered them. And so there's a lot of people that will talk about, the church is just so full of money and power, and we just need to take care of the poor. But you ask them, well, so tell me, what are you doing to serve the poor? And a lot of times, you'll find they're not doing anything. They write checks, maybe, at best. Maybe they write checks. But a lot of people aren't actually doing anything to serve the poor. And the people that are actually doing the most in the world to serve the poor, by far, are the Catholics. It's just true, just statistically true, right? I know you know this from the work that you're doing. Now, God bless your friends here, because they actually are different. They actually are encountering other human beings in great suffering, and they're giving of themselves to serve them. Amen. That's awesome that they're doing that. So then you have to go to the larger question is, I would ask them, so what you're doing, how many of the people you went to high school with, unless they went to some extraordinary high school, but I would just ask, the people you went to high school with, how many of them are doing what you're doing, is taking care of the poor? People you went to college with, let's say you went to some big state school with 30,000 people, how many of them are regularly going out of the way to take care of the sick, the poor, the dying, the orphans, the homeless? I think they're going to be honest that it's pretty slim, right? So you're extraordinary, and you can praise them and bless them, and wow, what you're doing is amazing. But let's just be honest, there's not, most of humanity in our relativistic age, there is no right or wrong. You do whatever you want. Everyone decides for themselves what's right or wrong. So if you want to serve the poor, hey, that's great for you, but if I don't want to, and I don't want to even give money to the poor, that's fine for me too. That's what the mentality of our age is. And I would come back as there's no organization that has done more for humanitarian aid, support of the poor, the sick, that built the hospital systems, all the education systems, all these things, than the Catholic Church. And to all of a sudden sideline the Catholic Church from that, and to think that we're going to really have a great culture that takes care of people, I doubt it. That's what, in ancient Rome, like that's how the Roman Empire was converted. One of the main reasons is because it was the Christians that were out adopting the babies that were abandoned on the streets. They were going out taking care of the sick, the people that had the plague, and others, their family members left them, and yet it was the Christians going and helping them, loving them, serving the poor. It was that witness to that heroic love. So I think actually maybe if I gave an eighth point, to combat moral relativism, might be to give the prophetic witness of care for the poor in our world today. Because if we dare to step outside the mainstream way of living, which is more for self, which is where most people are at, not your particular friends here, but most people are at, you dare to step out of that and you just give radical service, they're just not used to seeing that. And just like in ancient Rome, I think modern men and women will be deeply moved when they'll see Christians in their radical love, serving the poor and the suffering in the world.
Got everybody's eyes back now? So, what's the big insight? What did you get out of that he had to say today?
Love everybody, no matter how hard it is, and love everybody.
Don't right.
Talk the talk unless you walk in the walk. That's right.
I think you reiterated again also to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
You gotta meet them where they are. You can't argue with them, and you can't bring them to your level. You gotta meet them where they are.
Well, and he said again, lead with mercy to give people hope.
Yeah.
We've recently, Cindy and I have been recently looking at some videos, and that's conversation is so important in anything. We've actually studying marriage prep right now. We're thinking about getting married, right? Or are we looking at what went wrong? I'm not sure. But it's amazing the conversation that's needed in true conversation. And I think that's what Dr. Shreve's trying to say is how you bring the love out in that conversation, that you care for the answer. You're not being combative. You really care. Your heart is about finding happiness for the other. And I really think that that's where most of this session has brought us to understand there is pain out there, and they're coming up with some crazy ways to try to cover it. And I want to show a video in just a second, if y'all indulge me on it. That's probably on the far side. But what I want, as I play the video, what I want you to really look at, there's a couple of things. First of all, really has our society come to this? B is how the interview, there's two people doing the interview, and notice how each handles the people that they're interviewing and what happens in the way they react and the way they choose words. You'll see that. So if any other things that y'all would like to point out that you picked up from the videos today or anything, because I think this is going to bring some conversation about the whole package and maybe give us some insight as to what we may find. It won't be as radical as this, I hope, because I think we would all run south if we came across this on a regular basis. But I do wish that do hope that it brings the points across.
While you're looking that up,
Thanks, Brad.
the part that stuck on me was when he was talking about Augustine and that we can't do this ourselves. We strive for perfection, but we can't do it. We need God's help. And that all the saints have gotten there with the help of God. And in a relativistic, amoral world, they know they can't reach perfection, so they just don't even try. So they change the rules to make themselves appear normal and relative, because either they haven't met or have refused or haven't adjusted to the idea that they need God's help in this world. And so I thought that was pretty cool when Augustine had the light bulb come on, that he needed God's help to get to where he knew he needed to be. So that was kind of cool.
Well, realizing that it's fear.
Fear.
Yeah.
You're going to see that in.
The fear of change. The fear of, yeah.
I often think about when I was a child. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. But believe it or not, I was just a little old dorky kid. Didn't fit in anywhere. So it was real easy for me to get on a path and the wrong path. And y'all have often heard me say that Cindy got me on the right path. But I was just a confused kid. So what I did, and I think a lot of us go in that avenue. So you're right. It's fear. So please, bring it. Yep. Cindy, straighten it up. So give me probably 10 minutes of this. It may get a little busy, but Pierce Morgan is definitely the main interviewer here. So here we go. See if y'all can follow along. Can you hear that, Cindy?
No.
Let me try this again. All right. Try it again, Boop. Yeah. It was working fine. Let's see. It's just a second. Oh, naturally.
Obviously be leaning
go.
towards being female. I mean, police be pandering to a tiny, tiny proportion of the country. The boys and girls
All right, here we
kept
go.
in a cage instead of a tool to a hole in the wall. She had it right. I might wear a skirt to work tomorrow as part of my new gender-neutral, non-binary identity. A woman.
Disappointingly, Piers didn't wear a skirt to work.
Well, no, because I realised it wouldn't be gender neutral. I would obviously be leaning towards being female. And we can't have that in the modern world. So, Fox Fisher and Al, you don't have a surname, Al?
I do. It's Jónsdóttir, an Icelandic.
Let's keep it at Al.
Yeah.
You're both non-binary, neither male nor female. I know I'm treading on eggshells here, so let's first of all welcome.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming
Thank you
in.
for coming in. Because, frankly, this is, as our viewers will know, this is an issue exercising Piers with great sort of vigour and passion. It is also something that many of us feel really confused about. We want to be sensitive about it. It is confusing. Fox, I can't even say, can I, that you were born a certain gender, because you disagree with the idea that you were born either male or female.
I say you were born. What were you born?
Can I answer first?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I was assigned female at birth, and it's perfectly okay to say that.
What does that mean, assigned female?
So it means that when I popped out, and my sister's having a C-section today actually, so we're going to
good luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
Is she having? Has it been assigned yet?
Well, that's the first thing people ask, isn't it? Are you a boy or are you a girl?
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity. My book comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Are you a boy
Thank
or
you very much. Are you a boy or girl? I'm very much
Enjoy
a boy.
it,
But let's get back to you, Fox. So you were born.
So I was assigned female at birth.
So you were born a girl.
I never felt truly comfortable in my own body. And so I really struggled throughout my teenage years, the wrong puberty. As I was going through that, I felt more disconnected with myself. I was really confused with, whether I fit into this world. And I took steps eventually to start to transition. But as I did that, I realised that I was going from one set of expectations to another set of expectations as well, because there's extreme expectations for men and women in this world. And I thought, it's all about authenticity.
Have you had a full transgender operation, or what have you had?
Well, it's not really about that. It's about gender identity versus gender expression. So my gender identity is non-binary, and my gender expression is more masculine. So I hope that clears it up.
It doesn't clear up at all for me. So I might be the stupid one here. What are you now? What do you call yourself?
What am I? So I define as non-binary,
What does that mean?
That means that I identify as neither male or female fully, and these identities are recognised in other countries like New Zealand, Australia, Malta, and other places.
What's on your passport?
At the moment on my passport it says male, actually.
Right,
So,
because you had the transgender operation.
well, you don't need to have a trans operation to have male on your passport.
Okay.
You can be recognised as that either.
I didn't know
way.
that.
Oh, you had what some people might consider a complete opposite experience.
Yeah.
So when you were born,
Yeah. I was assigned male at birth.
Who
and
assigned you?
The doctor when I was born.
But what about your parents?
You know, when you are born, people perceive you as male or female
Well, that
based
makes
on your
sense.
genitals.
Right,
And
but it's not a completely irrational thing to do, is it?
Not at all, no.
No.
Because 99.999% of the entire planet is quite happy to be called boy or girl.
Yeah, of course.
You,
but
you accept that?
I
Your
accept that
parents,
most people
did your
do that,
parents
yes.
wait for the doctor to assign you, or did they say, oh, we've got a
It's
little
a
boy?
system that's in our society that has been made up.
But did
so
they
much.
say we've got a little boy, or did they wait for the doctor to say your assignation is that your child is...
Well, I
Well,
don't
everybody
recall that
agrees.
moment myself. I can't
Right.
really say what happened at that moment, but you know, they say this is a boy or
And then
this is a girl.
you felt you were also, and by the way, I completely respect people who feel like they have been born in the wrong sex. I get that. I completely support all transgender rights. I think that it's a huge deal to go through what you guys go through, and I totally respect it and would want total equality for you. So let's just
Thank
put
you,
that on the table.
That's
Okay?
very kind.
It's an important clarification. My confusion comes with the gender neutrality
Right.
aspect of this, because to me, you were born a boy, and I know you don't like that term, but you were born a boy and you've become a girl, now a woman, but you dispute that. You don't think you are a woman.
No, because I think there's very strong ideas about what it is to be a man and a woman in our society, and those ideas are entirely socially constructed, the thing we expect of women and men to do. And as a trans person who's been perceived as a man the most part of my life, who transitioned, I noticed how people perceive you differently in these expectations.
We can't call you he or she, just to cover one thing, right?
You can call us they, that would be fine. Singular, plural.
But when you say
singular.
they, I mean they is a plural word. For more than one
It's actually
person.
you can actually use it as a singular pronoun
If
as
you
well.
don't-
Nobody
It has-
does, do they? I mean, it's
Of course you do. If you don't know someone's gender, you would say, well, where are they? Or I hope they win the competition, or something like that.
But I can't say like she said something. I have to say they said
You
something.
could say they, or you could say
So
ours.
they said something to they.
To them.
to them.
Sorry, they said something to them.
Yeah.
Does that mean-
Rather than
She.
said something to him.
is that because you feel like you're two genders at the same time?
No, it feels because I sort of denounce the idea of being a man or a woman, so a non-binary is an identity on its own outside of this binary of...
But there are 71 different current Facebook ways of identifying your gender, including two-spirit person, gender fluid, and all sorts of other stuff. Do you categorise yourselves as any one of the 71?
Well, it's wonderful to have all those different identifications.
Is it, or is it just a
I
load
think
of
it muddies
complete
the waters a little bit.
gobbledygook? I mean,
It's not
seriously.
gobbledygook. You've got to respect what people want to be called, but
Why
I think
do I
that
have
doesn't
to?
help.
Why do I have to?
Because
It's
you're
about
being lived in
respect,
the world.
and it's about
If I
respecting
turned around
people's
right now and I
identity.
said to you, I am a black woman.
You have said that. You said what? You said you're black non-binary, haven't you?
Well, I
Which
made a
is
joke
non-binary
yesterday, but I'm
was.
being actually partly serious. If I just decided to identify myself as a completely different skin colour to the one that I am, that would clearly be ridiculous, right?
We're not
thing is that
discussing
you
race
don't.
here.
No, but if I did, would you respect my right to identify myself how I choose?
We're not here to talk about race. We're here to talk
But
about
I'm
gender.
asking you about race. So I'm taking your logic to
It
its
doesn't-
logical conclusion.
It doesn't really change anything about
I'm
my
just
life,
asking
about
you-
how
I'm
another
asking-
person
I'm
identifies.
asking- you
You
would-
can identify in any way that you
I'm
want.
just
so it's
asking-
totally up to
I
you.
get it.
Change how we identify.
I'm just asking a simple question. If I just now identify as a black woman, would you both absolutely think that's fine?
But you don't. This is a hypothetical
I just
thing,
did.
and you don't.
I just did.
You're just doing it for the sake of the
I'm
argument.
doing it as a hypothetical to get your response to a logical extension to the argument that you can basically identify in any way you
You
choose.
can.
The
But
problem is
doesn't
that this
take
is a
away from how we
hypothetical
identify.
intellectual discussion for you,
But
but
yours
this
is
is
a
about
hy-
actual
this is
identity.
a
No,
lie.
yours
This
is
is every day,
hypothetical
yours is a
too.
four-minute
You want the
segment.
right. Well, okay. So basically, you want the rights to identify how you choose,
As
and we all have to,
non-binary.
and we all have to respect that, and now have non-binary awards and so on. But you do not want to afford me the same rights to give myself an identity of my choice, and that's my point about this. There seems to be a hypocrisy and inconsistency.
There's no hypocrisy.
If you truly want to identify in
So I wanted to turn it off about now. You're getting the point. You're seeing an awful lot of what's happening here. And there's a lot about what we've learned that just took place in one interview. So a lot of what we've discussed, would anybody like to point out what you saw that was right or wrong about the interview? I know it's crazy, and I'm not trying to get into the craziness. Hope I haven't offended anybody. But what have you seen right and wrong about the interview compared to what we've been through in these sessions?
Well, right there at the end, he was doing exactly what Dr. Sri said to do. He was making them critical think, but you could tell that they were getting agitated because they didn't want to critically think about what he wanted them to think about. He was trying to get them to think about what they're asking other people to do, and they couldn't do it.
But they were so busy justifying what they
Yes.
were.
Yes.
Or what they want people
what they
to know
want to
them
be,
as.
yeah.
And it seems to me they did not like the gender that they were assigned
Right.
at birth because of expectations of the world. So what did they do? They both became the opposite sex,
Yeah.
and then they were met with then they were met with another set of expectations that they didn't like. The same battles that were happening, except on the opposite end, whether they're a woman. And so then they just copped out and said non-binary. So that's yeah.
So one of the things I also noticed was Piers Morgan got very combative. He kind of missed the mark as far as the interview. He wanted to prove somewhat of the, pardon me, but freak show of it all, instead of being compassionate. It was like he kept hammering them and hammering them. And the lady with Piers, and I didn't catch her name, but anyway, she tried a couple of times. And I think the interview may have gone in a different direction had she been able to say, hey, look, just help us understand this. We're uncomfortable with it. We don't know how to handle it. Try to help us with it. So that's the point of coming in with love and understanding and mercy. I'm not saying that you need to come in and say it's all okay, but there. And then, Cindy, you pointed out very well, they couldn't handle questions about it. They've only thought so shallowly that I'm not happy as I was born, so I must have been the other. Well, I don't want any expectations out of me, so I don't want to be either one. And with relativism and moral relativism, that just doesn't work. It can't work. If I want my truck and Brad wants my truck, only one of us can have the truck. So, and that's where, Piers Morgan was down another avenue. Their interview, they were also down another avenue. They were purely justified. So, anything else that y'all thought about?
Like they're wanting acceptance, but I feel like it's stemming from something deeper than gender. They're portraying it as, oh, it's gender. This is going to make me happy, whatever. I mean, a lot of people typically go through that from day to day. They just want love and acceptance and happiness, and instead of like reaching to God for that, they choose a bigger house or to become a girl. It's just, it's sad.
Yes. Robert?
The Folger Police Academy had the FBI agent that handles all those sexual crimes. And he said, basically, people do things for two reasons, to gain something or to keep losing something, and everything's progressive. So if you try to rewind those two people, you have to kind of wonder what he said. If you take faith out of the equation, we're not dealing with faith anymore. What happened in their lives to make that, where they had to compensate or gain something or keep from losing something? What happened to them to get to that point? Because they had some pretty interesting, that's just mine, of what he showed us.
Yes.
But when you think about something, everything you do to gain something or to keep from losing something, and everything's progressive.
As youngsters, children is to be accepted. They want acceptance. And if these particular people were judging, didn't want to be judged, but they were judging that what God made them didn't suit, because somewhere along the line they weren't accepting the fact that I'm supposed to be in the male role, or I have feminine feelings, therefore I must be female. Or I have masculine feelings, therefore I must be male. And to be accepted, they weren't accepted until, well, in this particular instance, the gender has now come to the forefront. They weren't, they were choosing. Now, with that gender choice, they have a mask they can pull into. So,
they're still struggling.
it's still like peer pressure, with kids, it's peer pressure. I'm gonna do what,
I agree.
to be accepted.
And most kids are trying to impress who? Their parents. So if your behavior is displeasing to your mom and you're a girl, maybe you don't want to cook or learn what women do and how they do things, and you play with the boys, that might be a cop out. Or if you're not pleasing your dad because you're a boy and you don't feel like doing the things he wants to do, you might run the other way. And so yeah, you're obviously not pleasing somebody, and you're looking for something that works.
Somewhere to fit.
Don't know, but yeah, every man's got a story.
And the relativism of it is, that's what works for me.
And so let's,
Information from the family pictures changed today from where it was.
so let's, and that's a great point in something else, Robert, but let's think about this again. What they're missing is that perfection is possible.
Right.
Only through God. Only through living as Christ has lived, and we have been taught through Christ. They're missing that avenue. They're not being taken down that avenue. And they Robert just mentioned the parenting that goes on today. I just finished doing a paper on this. As a matter of fact, it said, look, masculinity, the father has his place in the family. Feminism has its place in the family. Neither one of them, no matter what position, working mom, household dad, can replace feminism and masculinity. It's what we learn from each other. Compassion from the mother. Forgiveness from the mother. Rules from the father. Authority from the father. I mean, there's things there. Still compassion from the father. They need to learn compassion from the father, but in a different sense. Mothers most often bring children to God. Yes, it is the man's job to get his family to heaven, but in today's society it's normally the mother at this point. And we hope that changes. We hope that continues to change. It seems like there's a little bit in our area, at least, where it does. So, bringing people to understand there is happiness, there is perfection through God, in getting inside their head to understand your avenue does not make sense. There will never be a happy point. Talking about not being accepted. You've gone from male, who is, whatever, 49.9%, no, I'm sorry, 99.9% accepted, to female, which if you were really a female is 99.9 accepted. This 0.1%, now you flip-flop that, which is a much smaller position, become transgender. Now you're saying, I'm not either one. You are really pushing yourself into a total non-accepted position.
Exactly.
With people who are so confused because they don't comprehend what you want. Mainly it's safe to say that they don't know what they want. But this is where our conversation has to come in a loving manner. What is it you're looking for? What are you looking for? Anything else?
It just must be such a slap in God's face. Like for someone to say, you don't know what's best for me, I know what's best for me.
The world's hurting. The world is really hurting, and it's missing love. You You said it earlier, Ada. Love. Love's everything in the world. God is love. No love, no God. No God, no love. No direction. Direction is love. All that we can do. And that's why it will be so important for us to continue forward in this process of talking with people about moral relativism, is to show you do love them, you do care. When you walk up and there's a real old person, you know, in their last moments, you show them every bit of the compassion you have and love and sharing. And I can't fathom what it does for that person, but I know it must be something, just to show you love them, you know. If Keith was here, or Miss Beth, if Keith was here, I'd ask him how it makes him feel when I love him that way. But you'll have to make him watch this just to get that. But anyway, what is going to be our greatest barrier to addressing moral relativism going forward as each individual in this room? Anybody want to share with me what you're afraid of still, or what you don't know, what you don't think you know?
You can work your whole life, and it just takes one impressionable person to destroy everything that you've built in a job. They go to school and when they're impressed by somebody that's on the other end, it could just undermine everything you do.
But all we need to do is make one impression. We sow seeds, and we need to sow seeds in the conversations and the talking and all, and we're to sow the seeds. God will make them sprout. Nobody else can make them sprout.
That's it. We can save just one little lost.
Can't do them all, can we?
That's it. No.
Can't do them all. So.
And we won't know either who we've affected on down the line as long as we treat them with kindness and compassion. So.
How many of you in the room realized that it was that extreme? Have y'all seen things that made you realize that the world's that extreme now? Yeah. Some of us kind of got blinders on. Most of us have watched too much TV, haven't we? So.
Working in PD and PICU, I will say that even around here,
Sure.
it's very real.
Sure. It's crazy world. Anybody want to share how this study has affected your thoughts on moral relativism or anything else before we wrap up tonight?
I just think we have to remember to lead with mercy. I think if you do that, you can't go wrong. You just have to love the sinner.
Mercy, mercy, mercy. And caring.
I think facing our own fears too. We've got to face our fear to be able to face anybody else's, or to help someone else face theirs.
I want to thank Father Paul especially for allowing us to do this. Deacon Paul, who has done a great job for us, and I made my attempt to fill his shoes. I know I can't. I'm impressed by him every time I listen to him. He's got such a great depth of knowledge. It's wonderful. Miss Mary, Dr. Mary DeVille now, because I know she's Dr. Mary DeVille. I have thoroughly enjoyed her Tuesday mornings. She has done an incredible job for our parish as well, and I hope this continues more and more. And if you have something you want done, I would highly recommend it to Father to say, hey, we'd like something on this or that to move forward and learn on, because I think the more of this we know and understand, the more we're around it, the more comfortable we'll be at maybe helping the right person instead of seeing it for the first time and jumping back and away from it. We'll be more ready to walk forward into the danger of the conversation. So, our final prayer, if we may. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, your truth is made known in your word. Guide us to seek the truth of the human person. Teach us the way to love, because you are love. Jesus, you embodied love and truth. Help us to recognize your face in the poor. Enable us to live out our vocation to bring love and justice to your people. Holy Spirit, you inspire us to transform the world. Empower us to seek the common good for all persons. Give us a spirit of solidarity and make us one human family. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
And Father, Son. Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Good job, Kenny.